Jono, good morning.
What's up, Mark?
How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm really
All
good.
right. So this is our first podcast, and one of the things we said is, in our meetings we always segue in, and then when we're talking about this, we have the idea of also segueing out. So segueing in, how would you like to segue in today?
One of the ones I love topics from are the what was your first car? Because I feel like there's so much nostalgia.
Yeah.
And yeah, man. And I loved my first car. So
Yeah, I love my first car. I love the story behind my first car too. Is that too much to talk about?
Not at all. I
right.
think you should tell it.
All right. So my first car was a 1971 Buick Skylark, and so it was 71, and I bought it in, I want to say 79, and it had like 16,000 miles on it. It was perfect. And when I walked up to it, I went with my dad, and when I walked up to it, I was like, this thing is unbelievably, it's like brand bloody new. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at my dad, and the price was a price that I was comfortable with. And all of a sudden, this like much older gentleman, he had to be probably, who knows now? I mean, I was 19 at the time, but he felt like he was like 70 or something, right?
Yeah, he's probably like 25. No,
right? He walks up and he says, "Do not sell this car to this kid. He's going to destroy it." And the seller was an older gentleman as well. And he's like, "Well, they got here first." And the guy spent like 10 minutes arguing with this guy why he shouldn't sell it to me, right? Well, of course, that made me want it even more.
Naturally.
And so...
Come to find out, it was actually his neighbor, just like trying to push you to buy it.
Exactly, push the price, right? Anyway, so he honored the price, even though the guy said he'd pay more, which was really super cool. And yeah, you could be cynical and say he was a setup.
No, I doubt it was.
But it was really wild, right? And anyway, so it was a beautiful car, and I loved it, and that was my first one. How about you?
That's awesome. Well, to give context, I'm the baby of the family and the only son. So naturally I was, as my sisters would say, I was pampered because my sisters both had stick shifts, no automatic doors, Corollas, just piecers. And then I got a 1999 Toyota Tacoma extended cab. But the problem with it was it wasn't four-wheel drive. So I had a V6,
Right.
But it was rear wheel. And moving from Atlanta to Utah, going in the snow was quite an experience.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's actually probably the reason why I do know how to drive well in snow because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved it. It had all its quirks. I think the previous owner was a smoker. So every time it got hot in the Atlanta sun, it just reeked of that. But yeah, no, it was a great car.
All right. Well, speaking of cars and traveling, right? So one of the things we said we'd do is talk about what we're trying to achieve with this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where should we start on that one?
Well, honestly, I feel like the passion I feel like that you have and also that I have for just small businesses, I really think is where a lot of our content drives from.
Mm-hmm.
And podcast to me feels like a great venue. We're not chasing the podcast hurry. Like we're, I think, a couple of years late in that sense, but
Right.
It's because people, our readers or viewers or even customers love to listen. And
Right.
So I feel like it's a great venue for them to be able to just turn it on while they're in their truck, going to a job site or whatever they're doing. And honestly, I would love to start there. Like we were talking earlier just about your experience with small businesses.
Right.
Like where did you find that passion for them?
Well, it's part of the origin story really for 90, right? Because when I came out of school, I joined what at the time was like one of the most respected banks in the country. And they got in trouble by doing a bunch of bad loans in the oil and gas patch. And so after the 14-month training program, which was something they did back in the early 80s, they sent me to Oklahoma City to work out bad oil and gas loans. And so that experience was intense.
Very exotic too.
And
sure.
Exactly, Oklahoma City. But it taught me a bunch of different things. But one of the things it taught me was, what a bad loan is, and obviously a bad loan's to a bad company. And so, what happens when companies go under, and, it really affects the whole community. I mean, Oklahoma City was pretty hard hit by the bank that made all these bad loans because it went under. And then a lot of the companies, were over levered. They weren't particularly well run because they were in this industry that had huge wind at its back, right? So you could get away with, being a crappy company builder and taking silly risks, and so I started to learn what poorly run companies look like. What it does to the community, what it does to the investors, what it does to the employees, what it does to their vendors, right? And that sort of set me off on this journey of really wanting to understand what a good-looking company looks like, and what it takes, and who are the founders, and what's the story behind it. And obviously, I could go on and on and on. But one of the reasons I love small and mid-sized businesses, right, which is who our company, focuses on helping, is, they're in the marketplace, and it's a relatively unfettered, unregulated marketplace for almost all of them. And so, they're subject to the positive and negative feedback loops of the marketplace. And so there's something, really healthy about that, number one, because they're not like leaning into lobbyists. They're not leaning into regulations or trying to get regulations that help them compete at the, to the detriment of those who aren't well positioned to sort of handle the regulations. But, that's where, ultimately, healthy societies, they're really, really good at making sure that they have this, sort of this continuous flow of new companies, and companies that, obviously employ, people in small towns and mid-sized towns, and obviously large towns as well. And so there's just something about small and mid-sized businesses that I think is like fundamentally important for society.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's your neighbors, right?
Right.
Like, not everyone works at some large conglomerate place unless you're in some random town that has Walmart sitting next to it or whatever. But like for me personally, I was in school, in high school actually. My dad, we moved back from Georgia to Utah, and he started a business just at a little incubator shop close to our house. And it was a protein supplement for people coming out of surgeries, because his whole background was in pharmaceutical sales. And like watching him go through that grind of what a small business, working it up to even like $1 million in revenue a year, like it was, I mean, talk about trying times for him, and even for all of us too, just because it's that initial kind of investment. And anyways, I just remember taking a job with him. He offered it to me as his son, which was super nice. But I learned really fast that, when you're going from that growth stage of kind of garage or like 2 or 3 employees, and trying to scale it, there's so many things that you can make decisions on that may be great, maybe not great.
Right.
Even from like disconnections from like even your founders not being able to communicate with one another.
Yep.
I mean, he had founders, one in, I think, North Carolina and one in Mississippi, and they were all over the place. And I think they were trying their best, but like I learned to love that kind of chaos that happens within SMB. And then my experience has just been more and more with working with companies that focus to help support those people. Yeah. And so it's been wild to watch, even just with a 90s story too, of just how we're trying to help those senior leaders as much as possible with those the things that they may not have access to.
Right.
Like you were talking about financially, it was your kind of like intro to it.
Right.
And for me, it was more just like living in the chaos and knowing that my dad had no idea what marketing could be like.
Right.
As even in the digital age, moving into that. And so it was, for me, it was an awesome opportunity just to learn. Yeah. And then startups after that I've worked with, it's just been interesting to watch that growth.
Yeah. And the cool thing about, obviously all the companies that are super well known now, they all were startups at one point, right?
Yeah.
So and the stories are cool, and sort of I think it's fascinating to sort of watch leaders and senior leadership teams and the employees and everybody sort of navigate the stages of development, right? When you go from it's just an idea, and then you got to go prove product market fit and see whether or not product market fit is someone want it, and are they going to pay you a reasonable price so that you can actually make a reasonable return on your time and your capital, right? And then all of a sudden, you watch these things evolve, and you got some employees, and then you go to that second stage, and we won't get into it all today, right? But the third stage, the fourth stage, and you turn these ideas from businesses into companies, right? And the big idea behind the difference between a business and a company is a business is something that, it's generating revenue, it's got employees, but if the founder gets hit by a bus, or the founder just wants to retire, it's gone.
Yeah.
Right. And as opposed to a company, like the simplest definition is a company is a business that someone would love to take over leading for you, or take over and buy from you, right? So it's something that people think is going to persist. It's got to, it's going to be here in 5 to 10 years. It's going to generate a reasonable return on investment for the investors, and it's going to be a place where people are going to want to go and work, and where other people are going to go and buy, right, stuff from. And so that whole evolution from stage 1 to stage 5, I don't know. I find that the most interesting thing, right? It's when it gets to a big company, or even I don't say worse, but it gets to a conglomerate where you have all these divisions and all these things. I mean, it's interesting, but not nearly as interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I got great advice when I was back in school a while ago, where someone said, they said, you got to figure out what stage you actually love.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you go out into like a work for a General Mills or something like that, that's a very different type of business,
right,
than the plumber that I hired 2 years ago to help me finish off my basement.
Yeah.
And like to your point about the founder, it's like this guy was in Alaska, and he stopped feeling like the tips of his fingers, and he had to go in to get emergency surgery. And guess what? While he's dealing with that, like his business is basically stagnant.
Right.
And so like it's just, those are very different problems that people are facing and dealing with, but the pains also are just different as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's fascinating just because, and really like to your point, we're in a weird state too of like boomers moving into retirement,
right,
and they've got these incredible businesses that they've built up.
Yeah.
What's the next stage? Is
right.
it to hand it off to a child that they've had, or
right.
like someone that they know, or do they sell it to somebody else,
right.
or does it just close up?
Right.
Which is kind of a crazy idea.
Yeah. And obviously, and part of the reason, one of my little, I don't know. I think I don't know if I want to use the term passion, because I don't think that's the right word, but one of the things that I feel strongly about is I believe, and we'll talk about this in another episode, but there are 5 types of entrepreneurs, right? And the famous ones are the visionaries, right? Those are the ones, the Elon Musks, the Steve Jobs, right, of the world, Bezos, right? They have this vision for sort of changing the way the world does something, right? Something that the world buys or needs, or a problem that it has. And so that's one type, right? And then the next type is more of a legacy founders. And so the difference between legacy and visionaries is visionaries are saying, hey, there could be this brand new industry that I want to create, or I'm going to completely, revolutionize the way people do something or buy something. And then you move to the legacy guys, and and those folks are more like, hey, there's this industry, and I think I could build a better company, right? I could be, it's a better place for people who love being in this industry to go work, kind of like that's kind of the Boeing thing, right? Or Hewlett and Packard, right? This is a place for engineers to come and create great products in the technology space, but they're entering into a market that already exists. They just want to build a better company. And then the next one is really, I belong to a bunch of different peer groups over the years, and the next one is probably the most common form of an entrepreneur, and that's lifestyle entrepreneurs, right? And these are these entrepreneurs who, they're smart people, they're ambitious, but they don't want to work for someone. They want their own company, and they want their own life, and they want to do it their way. And we actually have ways to identify whether that's kind of who you are using some version of an Enneagram tool. But there are a lot of lifestyle entrepreneurs, and you see them in marketing. You can see them in like dentists. You can see them in a bunch of different types of industries, and it's a significant percentage of entrepreneurs, right? So that's the third type. The fourth type are accidental entrepreneurs, right? And the accidental entrepreneurs are folks who just end up for whatever reason owning a company and running a company, right? Could be your family gave it to you. It could be that you just didn't want to finish high school, right? And next thing you know, you got a truck, and I don't know, maybe you're power washing. Because I've seen some of these, right? And they're actually like, wow, build a pretty cool company, right? That's
awesome.
But just doing something, right, to make some money, doing something you're kind of interested in, right? So maybe a car person's like, hey, go out and wash exotic cars and get paid for that, and end up having a business. And then the last is kind of one that is a new category that I've sort of, I don't want to say created, but I've identified, I think, and it's sort of opportunistic entrepreneurs. And so these are people who are just very opportunistic about the moment. They're actually not trying to build a company. They're just trying to make some money. I can give you a bunch of examples, but you could even say, maybe one of the Kardashian kids is like, hey, I'm famous. And the next thing you know, they start taking advantage of their fame, and next thing you know, they got $1 billion company because they got into it, right?
Totally.
But they entered into it on an opportunistic basis. And, as I said earlier, one of my passions or things that I'm really interested in is not all of them are actually trying to build a company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But I think it's a shame that, if someone, because I've run into these people a lot over my years, right, where they've built a good business, but they haven't built it to sell, or they haven't built it to pass on.
Yeah, because that's not where they maybe started. They just were like, I need to make some money for my family or for myself or whatever.
And I was talking I remember one of the conversations, I was like, well, I was talking to this guy about EOS, right?
Sure.
And he's like, well, I'm going to probably just shut it down in a couple of years, because I'm like, don't you have employees? He's like, yeah, they can go find a job. And I'm like, don't you have customers? Yeah, but, I'm like, why wouldn't you just lean in a little bit more?
Yeah.
It's in your best interest. It's in your family's best interest, right? It's in your customer's best interest.
Yeah.
Right? It's in your vendor's best interest. Why not just lean a little bit more into building something that you can, like I say, either pass on to a next generation of leadership, or you can sell it? Why wouldn't you do that? So, that's one of the things that I think we as a company, I want to lean into, right? Helping people recognize that with just a little bit more discipline, just a little bit more, and discipline around learning and understanding, and then doing the right things, you can take a business and turn it into a company. And that's kind of, part of why I built the 5 stages of development, was to show people, the path to get from a business to a company, to get to something where, it's clearly something someone would like to either buy or take over leading.
Right. I have a close friend, actually, I went to lunch with yesterday, who is honestly a serial entrepreneur. So I wonder, I was trying to think of what type that they would fall into your 5.
Right.
I think opportunistic, probably the one that you've kind of coined, is probably the one that he's at. He literally grew a business that's incredibly successful today, that actually helps people's homes smell nice. So it's like kind of like a new innovative way of doing something.
Right.
And but I was at lunch with him, and he had kind of like stepped away from that business just because he's ready for the next kind of like stage one type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of who he is.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was funny because I told him, I'm like, I think when I am at a company that's about 1,000 employees, I'm tapping out. It's just not as fun for me as it might be for somebody else.
Yeah.
But for him, it's like, he loves that where that fusion is happening, like that heat of like growing something from nothing to something. Yeah. And it's just crazy to me because that's just how we're all kind of wired.
Yeah, and it's a great point. I mean, it's not just about, sort of the founders, right? It's like you said, it's like, I'm sure there are a lot of people who don't want to go work for a Fortune 500 company, as an example, right? And so it's interesting too to think through the, getting to the point where you're self-aware that, say to yourself, look, I don't want to be a part of I don't want to lead a stage 6 company anymore, right? Right. It's like, I remember when Gino told, Gino Wickman, right, the founder of the entrepreneurial operating system, when he told everybody who's going to sell EOS worldwide, which I don't know what it is, 4 or 5 years ago, that, he knew as soon as the company needed an employee handbook, it was time for him to pull the ripcord. Yeah. And so, self-awareness, he was aware that, he wanted to get it to, I think that business was clearly stage 5 because it was sold. Sure. And, but, he didn't want to take it to that next level. Right. And he probably was thinking, in terms of like number of employees, right? I don't want to get to the, he's probably saying, I don't want to get to the place where we have so many employees that we need an employee handbook. And so, yeah, it's funny. I don't, we're all different. We're all wired differently. We're all, sort of interested in sort of different types of challenges. And, I don't view myself as being a serial entrepreneur in that regard. Like I'm pretty focused on just, building this company. And then, I'm also a little bit older. So, right. It's not like I want to go, do this again and again and again. Personally, I'd love to just make this company a great company, now it's not a pretty darn good company already, but,
but built to last.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. But, get it to the point where, it's in a position to go public or it's public and, I can sort of become more of a chairman person, but I can see other people like loving the first 5 stages. You're right. And sort of navigating the complexities associated with going from, identifying a need to, hiring great people to, sort of putting in the stratums of, of the organization and sort of get it to stage 5, get it to the point where, it's something that could easily be sold, get it to the point in the cycle where it's, a good time to sell and then go do it again. Right.
Do you feel like with the podcast, it feels like we're going to be talking to a lot of visionaries.
100%.
Like a lot of people who may be going from stages 0 to 5 or 6. Yeah. As well as probably even leaders of those companies that may not be directly visionary, but they are tied to the senior leadership team of like I remember someone told me that they knew they were out of a business when they hired an HR person, not because they were forced out, but just because they're just like, this is when it doesn't get as much fun for me. Yeah. And it's like, to your point of the awareness side, it totally makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it could be obviously there's so many just different interesting, conversations with the visionaries. Those are really interesting conversations with, some call it, EOS calls it integrators. Others call it second in command. Others call it, chief operating officer, or, there's probably other things, president, right? I hear people use that as well, right? Having conversations with those, but then even, having conversations with, other members of the senior leadership team that, are sort of in that, in the game. In particular, I think we should always be focusing on stage 1 through 5 companies, right?
Yeah.
I don't really see me wanting to sort of talk about, people who are like in a company that's got 6 different operating, units. I mean, part of me could see talking about the dynamics associated with that. And it's like everything, you think, well, it's not that interesting until you get there and you're like, well, actually, that's pretty interesting because you're thinking about, okay, so you have these 6 different divisions, but you want the culture to be the same across the board. So, but I think, our focus is always on the, on that sort of stage 1 through 5 organization. But, like I said, there are stage 5 organizations inside larger organizations. And so who knows? But there's so much to talk about and so many people to talk to in those first 5 stages that are in those first 5 stages. I think we'll have our plenty to chat about.
Yeah, I feel like because you still, I mean, I think we all kind of work with small businesses, regardless of whether it be through 90 or just like friends of ours who are starting to try like new things. Like I'm obviously focused more on marketing, so I try to help benefit any founder that wants to pick my brain about things.
Right.
But I know that you've been working a lot with other companies like roofing companies or others. Like, how do you feel like that's been in regards to 90's vision of like helping grow a business to a company, and with a person who's like 35 employees? Like, are they feeling that they're able to hit those stages quite nicely, or is it just more of like a grind for them to try to get there, or is it different for each one?
Well, every single company is different, but in terms of they're all at various stages, right? So I don't think I've never had a client who was sort of past stage 5, right? And I've had clients all the way from stage 1 through stage 5, right? And I think part of my job, and we're talking about me being a coach right now, right? Which I don't do that much anymore.
No, but I mean, like we're close to SMBs regardless.
Yeah. But as a coach, part of it is just helping them be, I say one of the keys to sort of enjoying life is being self-aware and and aware of others, and sort of getting the game you're in or getting the joke that you're a part of right now.
Right.
But I know it's helpful for them to know where they are and to understand what the implications are in terms of, what they got to be prioritizing, right? You're prioritizing something very different at stage 1,
right,
then stage 3, then stage 4, then stage 5. Like,
what would you say like the top things that people usually focus on from stage 1 to stage 2?
A product market fit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 100%, right? Making sure that,
like if I want to go clean garbage cans, I got to make sure that people actually want that service.
And that they're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Or even pricing maybe to figure out what the price is going to be. Or, yeah.
Right. And then obviously you're also trying to figure out, so let's just say we've got a service that people want. We know we can charge a reasonable amount for it in terms of actually getting paid for the work we do.
Right.
But now do we know that we can go find enough customers?
Yeah.
Right. And then do we know that we can actually, sell, right? And position this so that they'll buy what we're selling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So stage 1 is definitely product market fit. And then I think, stage 2 is now can you, okay, so you got part of it figured out. But now you got to figure out, how to make it scale, right? How to repeat, wash and rinse and repeat, right?
Right.
And then it, we won't get into it all, right? But then you got to figure out, okay, so now how do I start to actually hire people and train people and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
And
what the culture you want to build and not build and everything else.
And the truth is most people don't think about this stuff. Right?
Well, I mean,
certainly culture, not,
right.
If you've never done it before, you're not thinking culture unless, you're just, one of those people, and there are a lot of them, right? But if you're one of those people who are like, hey, I want to go figure out how to do this, and I want to go take advantage of, like our Vision Builders workbook, which says, hey, even if you're starting a company, you need to be thinking about culture. You need to be thinking about, who's your ideal customer. You need to be thinking about what the heck it is you're selling, right? Are you selling something that's like less expensive than anything that's out there? Are you selling great customer service? Are you selling a brand new way to sort of solve a problem, right? Are you selling status? What are you selling? And so anyway, point being is there's a bunch of stuff that's really important to figure out, but the truth is a lot of people start companies without figuring this stuff out because no one said, hey, right?
Yeah, they didn't give them a playbook.
There's no playbook, right, for a lot of people, and obviously we're trying to help in that regard. We're trying to put playbooks out there for people to give them some food for thought, and then they're going to do what they're going to do. But yeah, just trying to really help people build companies without grinding too much. You're going to grind, right? Now the question is, can we reduce the amount of unnecessary grind?
Yeah, because I know you've been on a health kick recently, or I shouldn't say recently. I'm sure it's been over a decade now of health and what your intake is from food levels and also exercise. I'm in the stage of trying to survive with little kids, but that's my excuse to not get out there more or find balance in or harmony, I guess you could say, of life. But have you felt I remember my father, when he was starting his company, he would wake up at nights with terrible headaches because he just couldn't get it out of his body of just stress. Keeping stay open each month over month, which is harder than to think about who do I hire next or culture, to your point.
Yeah.
But have you felt finding that balance or harmony, I guess, for yourself has been pretty a big unlock for you?
Well, I'm still growing and learning.
Right.
And so, it's an interesting, this week I was at a forum for 30 plus visionaries, and they had 3 speakers. I was one of the speakers who spent 2.5 hours sort of sharing, their expertise and
different types of businesses, like software businesses to whatever agency type or
marketing, law firms, consulting firms, manufacturing. The whole,
it's incredible that you can get such a diverse market type or industry focused type, and there's still stuff to learn from one another as visionaries.
100%. They're all in different industries, but they're playing the same game. Right. So one of the speakers was a performance coach, and her story includes and really is centered around stress, right? And helping you recognize what's causing stress, and then the short version is to respond to that trigger that causes stress within 10 seconds so that you can reduce the level of cortisol that's produced by that event.
Right.
Because interestingly, and this is me sharing what I heard, and obviously I'm going to do a lot more research on this because I'm fascinated by what she talked about. But basically, if you end up having a lot of stressful moments and you don't address them, like with breathing or with some sort of counteracting action, you'll end up with lots of cortisol flowing through your body, and typically there are 2 outcomes. One is you have trouble going to sleep, and then 2 is or you wake up at the middle of the night. So I still wake up at 3 to 4 o'clock, right? So I still have stress. So I'm fascinated by this because I'm like, hey, I want to.
Well, absolutely.
I'd love to figure out how to reduce the cortisol flow when not necessary, and so had that. Just talking back to the stress, and then actually yesterday and today I read an interview with a doctor who's writes all about how to monitor stress, and in particular how to use HRV, your HRV measurement, which I can't even remember what the HRV stands for. Do you remember what it stands
for? No, I
don't. Right? But it's on my Aura ring, right? And basically that you can sort of, if you have lots of volatility in your HRV, that's a healthy thing, and if it's really flat, that's not a healthy thing.
Interesting.
And basically, if you have lots of volatility in it, you'll have better sleep, and you'll be less likely to wake up at night. And so, it's one of the. There's lots of reasons I love being alive right now, but we're really getting some amazing research and insight into stuff that's pretty important for us as leaders and business builders. And I want to even talk about that stuff in this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a level of humility of just even recognizing that you can't just ignore it. Because if you ignore that type of stress, then it's just going to come back and bite you.
Yeah.
Like, I think some people, we all go through that time of whether we're weightlifting or something where we push through. We're running a mile or we're running a marathon or we're running just training. Yeah. It's like you have to push through certain things to actually get to that runner's high.
Right.
But at the same time, there's also the counterbalance or argument of if this is stress and you're not actually taking care of yourself, then it's going to be pretty hard to actually take care of anybody else.
Well, especially because, our topic, our audience here is leaders and people who want to lead, right? And so, when you're stressed, you're not your best.
No.
Right? And, I mean, we'll take fun of ourselves and, over the course of these podcasts. And you've been now with me for how long?
Coming up on 9 months.
9 months. So you've seen me stressed.
Oh yeah, I think you've seen me stressed as well.
And I've seen you stressed, right? And we know that we're not our best, right?
Yeah.
When I'm stressed, I'm not as patient as I should be, and I'm not listening as well as I should be.
Sure.
And that causes people to, shut down and not share in the moment. Now we're pretty good, I think as a senior leadership team in calling each other out.
Sure.
But the reality is that if we could, if you could master stress, right? And by master, I always mean not only are you good at handling something, but you can actually teach the concept to others. And so for me, actually, I know I'm on a journey right now.
Yeah.
Literally right now.
Right.
To become sort of more of a master of the concept of stress and how it impacts us as leaders. And because ultimately, another podcast we'll talk about it, right? But you can't lead without followers, right? And I love free places and free societies, and so obviously, we're not telling you got to follow me. It's like you want to follow a leader, right?
Well, yeah.
Or else,
because the vision's so juicy that why wouldn't I want to?
Right, but I'm just saying in terms of for you to be a leader, it means you need to have followers, and if you need followers to be a leader, then you need to make sure that your followers actually want to follow you, right?
Yeah.
And getting all stressed out all the time,
or having burnout or something else,
right? And just sort of all of a sudden being that person that's like, I don't really want to hang with them anymore. This isn't fun, right? So I think, I think, and I know, I mean, I was there 3 days for this Visionary Forum, and several people at the end when they were checking out got teary, sort of watery eyes. And, they were just talking about stress, and they were talking about, sometimes, the loneliness associated with the journey. And they were just really super appreciative of being able to talk about stuff.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, think of, like you said this too, how great it is to be alive today.
Yeah.
My wife and I talk a lot about, awareness and, how do you make yourself better, going from better to best, or, trying your best every single day. And I just feel like being able to have an open dialogue conversation with other founders or even visionaries or leaders in that matter, I don't know if that was happening even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And even having the self-awareness of like, guys, I'm struggling here with
Yeah.
this thing and I don't know how to handle it.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, one of the things that I deeply believe is that, you know, if you genuinely want to build a company, right? If you genuinely want to start something and build a company, you ultimately, you know, you're really wise to be aware of the fact that you've got an operating system, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously, you know, take advantage of the best one you can possibly find. I think you need to find a coach, right, to help you, right, because you can't read the label from inside the jar. And then finally, you need to, I think joining the peer group super cool. So I think we're running out of our 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Want to segue out?
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think?
You tell me. I came up with the segue in, so.
What do you find most interesting about our conversation? What topic?
Besides the Buick. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, I love to know that we're all human.
Right.
And I think hearing you even talk just as you're wrapping up with your 3-day visionary thing that you conference or experience that you had this week, hearing people actually show emotion, it helps me know that like we're all in this as a team in some way.
Right.
And I think that's what I'm taking away from it right now.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. I'm just delighted we're here.
Yeah.
Right?
No
Episode
kidding.
1.
Yeah, man.
It'd be cool to see how it all evolves.
I know. It'll be good.
All right. Thanks, man.
Cool.
All right.
Bye.
Cheers.